Back double round here, but it's it's been a little while since I caught up with this guy, and even through the bye and through all the mayhem that happened down in Maryland a couple of weeks ago, he has been one of our Terps insiders here for a long, long time. We welcome Mike Ashley back onto the program. You know, for you and Marcus and Kavanaugh, everybody out there covering all this on a day-by-day basis, my pal at Terp Talk, Bruce Posner, I haven't talked to most of you because I wanted to let somewhat of the air settle to say, where are we? And also wanted to get a little bit of a basketball preview as we sit and talk Terps a little bit during the bye era for the Ravens here. But, Mike, what an unbelievable 5-month run this has been for the program, for the university as it relates to sports, because I don't know how they're going to get up and start to crawl and walk again after all this, man.
Well, it's in some ways, if you think back to Lynn Bias and all that, it seems like this athletic program has had a curse, a cloud hanging over it in a lot of ways, and a lot of that's been self-inflicted with the way they handle some of these what you'd call crisis situations. And this was a prime example where the adults, and again, off the University of Maryland campus, the Board of Regents for the whole university system just came back with just a shocking decision to kind of keep everything status quo, which didn't work for anybody. And what a unifying thing that was to see students on campus protesting about DJ Durkin keeping his job, and also to see state legislators, from Maryland coming out vocally saying, "Hey, we need to look at this a little bit harder." And of course, the fallout was that the Board of Regents chairman lost his job over it. Dr. Lowe is going to be resigning in June, and he in some ways has been kind of a stand-up guy, I think, through most of this. And I'm going to be
I'd hire him. You know, he's the one guy that's pretended to be a grown-up through all of this and show some compassion, stuff like that our president doesn't show in our country anymore, to say, I was wrong, we were wrong, this is wrong, seeing grieving parents, and not really as concerned with the lawyers and the backside as much as doing the right thing, right? And there have not been a whole lot of people down at College Park, including DJ Durkin, who have stepped up and said and done the right thing here this year.
Yeah, it is interesting, and to think that DJ Durkin got into his meeting with that 17-member committee, the board, and gave them one of his fiery pep talks, and was able to keep his job based on that meeting. Apparently, that he turned a lot of things. It makes you understand how he was able to go into so many living rooms and get people to play for him. And look, I don't mean to sound this bad about DJ Durkin. I just I got mixed emotions about that. I do think there were problems in the culture. It kind of killed me to see people talking about how the report comes back and says there really is no toxic culture. It's just that players were afraid to come to the coaches and talk to them about things. Well, isn't that toxic? Now, I understand why you want to come out and publicly say you don't have a toxic culture, but it's obvious they needed a fresh start at the top of that football program, and it may extend beyond that before we're all said and done. But if you played this whole scenario out in your head, if you're one of these guys that said, okay, you fire Lowe, you fire the athletic director, Damon Evans, you fire Durkin. Well, it starts with Durkin. You fire Durkin, then you fire the AD, then you fire the president, right? That's how these scandals play out sometimes. And then how do you rebuild that? Don't you have to hire a president first before you hire an athletic director, before you hire a coach? And what's the time frame? What does that do to the off season? What does that do to conditioning? What does that do to the players in the program now? Is it fair to these poor kids that have been dealing with this? It doesn't seem right just to call it a distraction, because it's something these kids are dealing with every day, not just their grief for their teammate and their friend, but all the things that go with that, wondering who your coach is going to be this week through much of the season. And the way the Board of Regents and some of these other people that really don't seem to have a feel for athletics handle it, issuing statements on Friday before Saturday games, did that make sense to anybody? I mean, it's just, I don't expect them to have a full understanding of how athletics work and how you try and make this the best possible situation for your student athletes, which is why we're in this mess in the first place. But by gosh, don't you have somebody there that can advise you and tell you how to maybe lessen the blow to these kids week after week as they go out there and try and represent their university? And, people got all huffy about guys not showing up for for the meeting with DJ the first time, and then there's already been a couple of transfers. Seemingly those are unrelated to this incident. More so, just guys not getting playing time, not happy, which is where we're at in college athletics these days. But that's going to happen. Yeah, Maryland's going to lose players. They're going to lose coaches. They're going to lose a lot of things here before all this is settled, and people are just going to have to come to grips with that. And it's just up to the administration, particularly Damon Evans at this point, to handle this the best possible way he can to make this experience still positive for the kids that are there, still going out there, risking life and limb every week. If you look at the current situation with poor Kasim Hill going down with an injury here last weekend, and waiting to see what else is going on with the running back. These kids are putting it all out there on the line. They just had a heartbreaking loss, and now, the path for them to get to that bowl game, where I think those kids wanted that so bad to honor Jordan McNair. I don't know if they can get there now, having to go through Ohio State and then Penn State. But we'll see. If there's one thing I know, it's not to give up on these guys based on what I've seen from their effort week to week.
Well, the Indiana collapse certainly, will define them to some degree, because I don't think anybody thinks they're going to beat Ohio State or Penn State at this point. But for where the program is and sort of the crisis management part of this, from the way it worked that day on the field that cost a kid his life, to everything that they had time to work on. And it felt to me like everything about the time was used in a cover-up. You know what I mean? Like, literally, no one says anything. No one talks to anybody. Keep the media out of this. Keep the parents out of it. Everybody was kind of held at bay. And the legal part of this, and, people getting down now on McNair's family because they're out for blood at this point, and they've got their lawyers involved in all of this. I can't imagine if that's the knock on the door at your house, whether your kid's a lacrosse player, a football player, a soccer player, a basketball player, that somehow in football this is that this has gone on other campuses. I had some HBO people on and some investigative people that are talking about football and whether you're going to let little Johnny play football when he's 8 years old or 10 years old or 12 years old. And you talk about these kids now as far as where they are in their lives. Every one of them just went through all of this, right? Like, do I want to go to Maryland? Do I want to go to James Madison? Delaware's calling me. Geez, I got a chance to go and play at Kansas or Kentucky or wherever the other schools that they chose Maryland instead of Rutgers or wherever their other choices were. Now, 16 months, 24 months, 36 months later, they're a sophomore, they're a junior, they're a senior. They've beaten Texas twice, as most of these kids now have. And they want to have something that feels normal. And none of this is normal for them. And then from the fans' perspective, Mike, and this is where I get involved, it's basketball season, right? So we're doing an event up at Buffalo Wild Wings on the 28th. And, I got Hell in a Shell, and I got my, Lamont Jordan jersey over here hanging in my closet, and my Maryland sweatshirt, and my national championship hat. And you're supposed to go back and feel good about this. There's not one part of this, other than maybe Wallace Lowe and a few of the things that he has said that have been heartfelt, that I feel like any of these Board of Regents, any of the sponsors, Kevin effing Plank, any of these people that has really felt like, boy, we got to make this better. Not where we're going to protect DJ Durkin 2 weeks ago and try to prop him up and bring him back like Weekend at Bernie's. What the hell are these people thinking down there, and why do I want to put a Maryland hat on and go down there and support this bile?
Well, but part of this was the definition of being tone deaf, and it seemed particularly true of people off campus that didn't really understand what the backlash was going to be when DJ was rehired here. But
they're all running around in their red underwear and the M sweater, and they're not seeing people like me in Baltimore that have done sports radio for 30 years. Nobody in Baltimore cares about the Terps. That's the dirty little secret. They're going to come up here and play their game, and it's not – they've never owned our community because they've never wanted to own our community. And in my case, for me – getting blocked doors from the PR department and all the crap that I see other reporters go through who really work at it a lot harder than I do, to just say, you know what? On Monday, I can just talk about the Ravens and pretend that they didn't lose to Indiana 34-32 last week because it's not on my timeline. It's not in front of me. My friends don't go. My friends don't egg me to go. They don't even know what time the games are because the university doesn't know when the games are 2 weeks before the game. So, there's a lot of roadblocks for Maryland in general in Baltimore, in D.C., because they really don't own either place. This is a point where they come back to you again, and you're like, oh, the Terps, they're down there. Oh, they have a dead kid, and they're not doing anything about it. And now I don't go to the games. I don't give them money. I don't buy tickets. What's going to affect that to make their brand better? And this was an opportunity for them to clean things up and make it better. And I go back to bias, and I know you do too. And this is worse than the bias thing. And the bias thing was not good, as you remember.
Right. That opportunity for the cleansing is still there, Nestor. And I think it's going to happen. Now, a lot depends on what kind of new leadership is put into place. But this is a much bigger problem, even than just this off season. What has happened? When I came on the beat 20 years ago, I was always surprised as the calendar turned from September to October. It was already in the football press box. It was already basketball season. And that's just the way it is at Maryland. This has always been such a great hoops area, thanks to Lefty Drizel and then Gary Williams, in particular. But I'm talking the whole area with the high school hoops in D.C. and Baltimore. This has just always been about college basketball in a lot of ways. And that's just been true from the get-go. Now, the other part of the problem is, I think when you talk about, getting your arms around Baltimore, and I really can't speak to that like you can and most of your listeners. I'm down here more on the D.C. side. But the same problem, anybody that's made that drive up there for a game, even basketball now where attendance is just been frightening the last, to start this season, it's tough to get there. It's just absolutely tough to get here with the nature of the beast here in D.C. Even on those Saturdays.
You know what? It's easy for me to get there, which is weird. I went down to D.C. on Monday night. Like, I go to Caps games, whatever. Like, I live in downtown Baltimore. It's not so bad, but I could see if you live, at Dulles Airport, where it would feel like a day trip, like where it feels to us to go to a concert down in Bristow or whatever the hell they call it down there. It's a day trip,
and
unless Hendrix is coming back or Elvis or the Beatles, it's tough to be thinking about going down there on a Tuesday night.
But I guess the overarching thing for me is I don't think people have that mindset. They're not willing to make that commitment to Maryland football, and that predates even some of these problems.
Sure.
Now, Ralph Friedgen got it turned around there for a while, but it wasn't so rosy at the end of his tenure, even there also. So it's just it's a huge problem. There is so much. I've never been in an area covering sports where there's so much competition. You think about pro sports towns, yeah, but here it's not just one pro sports town; it's two. You got Baltimore and Washington. With all the different things they offer on the sports schedules, plus everything else you have to do in this area. It's really a tough sell for the Maryland marketers, and then something like this makes it much worse. Now, I will say I was so disappointed here recently after the students had their protests after DJ was reinstated. I don't know, somehow I was kind of heartened that so many of them seemed to care so much. And then I thought, oh my gosh, it'll be great this Saturday. They'll come out in droves to the stadium. Well, that didn't really happen. So, I don't know if, I don't think students put their money where their mouth was on that. And then again, like I said, the basketball attendance so far, granted, not the greatest schedule yet, but it's just been it's not good out there right now. They've really, I don't know what you do right now. I think you as you're alluding to.
Well, you can't turtle up. You know what I mean? This whole we're going to go hide and we're not going to talk to anybody and we're going to be jerks to the media and we're going to pretend Baltimore doesn't matter and D.C. and we're just going to do what we've always done here, which is we're in the Big Ten. And, Mike, by the way, Mike Ashley joining us here from Terrapin Times, and I've been more loquacious in this segment than perhaps I've been because I have not publicly talked much about the Terps. I remember seeing Luke 2 weeks ago after all this went down on a Wednesday. We were literally together out in Owings Mills, and Luke and I aren't necessarily compelled on a Monday morning to talk about, do a segment off the Terps game, even though both of us kind of wind up watching 90% of the Terps football games because it's just part of our lifestyle. Even though I'm not out tweeting on every play and knowing every player, the game's on every week. I know when they play, but my audience isn't all that engaged in it. My friends aren't engaged. It's a weird thing, and I don't know what they're going to do to make that right. But Luke was so pissed off that we wound up doing the longest segment in the history of segments here because we had so much to say. And
there's a lot to say.
And I haven't talked to Marcus yet. I haven't talked to Positive. You're one of the first people I've talked to. But now this basketball thing bleeds in, right? And like on the 28th, we're going up to Buffalo Wild Wings. We're going to try to do a night where Maryland's playing Virginia. And the ACC thing, you talk about being in the football press box at Bird back when Wake Forest would be in week 8 or, Georgia Tech would be here in week 10 or whatever, and you're talking about basketball season. It's a whole different thing when you're in the Big Ten now, where at some point you're either going to get your ass kicked every time you go through the car wash here of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, and the odd Iowa or the odd Nebraska that you may draw in the wrong year in other years. The football thing and the commitment that their predecessors made here, and the Debbie Yows made, and the debt service that this franchise now has. I don't even call it an institution of higher learning. That's an insult to anyone's intelligence, I think, at this point. The money that needs to be generated here needs to come from people like you and me, who live sort of around it and sort of already have some affinity for, I don't know, Buck Williams or Len Elmore or, Keith Booth or something that moves you to want to get your Maryland gear out and wear the latest hideous thing that these clowns in South Baltimore are trying to dress up the clown show down there. And when a kid's dead, they run for cover. They're a real asset, I may say, with Under Armour, who I'm personally I'm disgusted by the corporate involvement in all of this too. Who was behind putting DJ Durkin back out there? I would say if Under Armour wasn't behind it, it wouldn't have happened. And, I see how much the money controls all of this, but I also see the Big Ten is the part of the money, and the football part of this isn't like Towson University where they can just make baseball go away and piss off some people. They're going to have to go play football here, and they're going to have to figure out how to find people in the stadium, and they're going to have to figure out all the sponsorship, all the money, all the recruiting around all of this, and they now need to do that in the aftermath of the biggest zit this side of the FBI investigation into the basketball side of the NCAA, right?
Yeah. Okay, that was a whole lot there.
I know. Let me towel off.
I know you're like a lot of people. You just have to vent sometimes, and
Thanks for playing Dr.
I know what you're saying. Now, first of all, I don't think Kevin Plank was the only one on this. I thought
that in the aftermath of the biggest zit this side of the FBI investigation into the basketball side of the NCAA, right?
Yeah. Okay, that was a whole lot there.
I know. Let me towel off.
I know you're like a lot of people. You just have to vent sometimes, and
Thanks for playing Dr.
I know what you're saying. Now, first of all, I don't think Kevin Plank was the only one on this. I thought they were altruistic, that were trying to do the best for Maryland. They thought what you're talking about, too, goes back to, if you look what DJ Durkin and his staff have done in recruiting the last few years, they've taken Maryland to a level that I think a lot of us always dreamed they could be, getting the best from the area and then going to compete against the best in the Big Ten or the ACC or whatever. And
they'll always be able to hang their hat on. They beat Texas twice. I mean, that means something in any century, in any era, right? Like they really did do that.
Now you wonder how good the team could have been last year if they hadn't lost both their top two quarterbacks. And then this year there's still some talent. There's a lot of talent there, but like I said, they've been playing with a cloud over them. They come out some weekends and play great, Texas. Then they come out other weeks and you can't even explain what happened. Temple, although Temple, I guess, has turned out to be a decent program this year. And then, unfortunately, they're back to the days of Ron Vanderlinden, where 5 wins seems to be the absolute plateau you're going to get to. So, I I don't know. You're right. I am encouraged, though, when you hear these kids commit to Maryland and how they talk about really wanting to wear those colors and play for the state school and the local school. And I think there's still a lot of that there. And I think a lot of them will want to be involved in helping restore Maryland's image. And I think that's something they're going to be able to hang their hat on. Now, if you want to move on to basketball, I'm very excited about that.
Well, I mean, it is a Big Ten. Football's the Big Ten thing. Now we move into basketball. And look, the basketball team is going to be representative this year, right? I mean, this is going to be an interesting year on the court. Now, whether anybody comes and watches it and what happens with the football fallout that will fall out in the middle of basketball season, from a pure let's watch the games, this is an interesting schedule. I think it's very difficult in February when you got to go out on these road trips and what. But names coming back, and as far as the talent back and Cowan distributing the ball, I'll buy into the fact that they're going to play meaningful games in the February and March. I'll buy that.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, right now they're not anywhere close to where I think they're going to be, and I think part of the problem, and maybe to his credit, is Mark Turgeon's playing too many guys right now. They're just trying out combinations, and that's why I think you've seen the ebb and flow of the first couple of games where they've had big leads that they've sort of lost, or they've struggled at times against Navy, and then even against North Carolina A&T, they let a second half lead sort of dwindle down a little bit, not enough to ever be in trouble. But that I attribute more to trying to find out what combinations work best. And you got so many new people. What do you got? You got 5 freshmen in your top 8. So you got a lot of guys playing together consistently for the first time in different situations, and I think they're good. I just can't tell you that. Well, I don't think I have to sell Jalen Smith to people there in Baltimore. I'm getting my first look at him, this year, and he is everything he's built. And I think what I got excited about, especially after seeing him play, was the combination of him with Bruno Fernando. Does anybody in the Big Ten have anything like that on their front line? 2 great, big, strong guys that are athletic, that can get up and down the floor, that can make things happen at both ends around the basket. I think that's going to be something that's going to make Maryland, a consistently good team down the stretch, particularly if those guys amp it up on defense, because that's where this team will make its run. And I tell you, the guy that impressed me so much, and I know he recently was benched, but Aaron Wiggins, oh my gosh, that kid is one of those freshmen, I hate to say like you're seeing at Duke, because that's an otherworldly thing right now, but one of those guys out of the box, so ready, game so much more mature beyond his years that I think it's going to be fun to watch him develop. And if you're a basketball person and you just watch him on the court, the decisions he makes, the things he does, he's just one of those guys that's just going to be such a glue guy, and that's almost selling him short, because I really think he's going to be a real star in the college game, and I'm really excited about where this team can be, by the end of December and into January.
Well, a couple of nice tests, too. The Virginia night, where we'll be together at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air that night, swabbing for the bone marrow registry, trying to get a little hell in a shell going here as the basketball season gets going. But, we all clamor for these ACC matchups. Well, here comes one, right? I mean, and here comes a very, very decorated Virginia team that was embarrassed the last time out against a state school from the Free State.
Well, right. And now I grew up in Virginia. I watch Virginia. I get to write about Virginia some too. And as much as I love Tony Bennett as a human being, and I think the way he handled what happened last year was just so classy, and actually in some ways elevated his program, even though they were in that awkward position of being the first number 1 seed to get bounced like they did. But they play a style that could be a very ugly game, and particularly with all these freshmen. Maryland's really going to have to bring their A game that night, and they showed it against North Carolina A&T, but they have 20-some assists in that game. So these guys move the ball and do a lot of good things, and the potential's there. But you're right, that's going to be a real test, because Virginia to me went from I thought they were a pretty nice team coming into this year, and then Braxton Key got eligible to transfer from Alabama, who was the missing piece. He's like a 6'8" wing player that they didn't have, a real athlete that can make a lot of things happen inside and out, and that means he can defend a lot of positions, big guys, wing guys, things like that. And that's something that Tony didn't have on this team before Braxton got eligible, which was kind of a surprise there. So, I think they're going to be really dynamic. They got an interesting test coming up this week too with the Hofstra game, because they're going to see so much zone it's going to make them sick. I think Hofstra's going to pack back in the zone and force them to shoot from the outside, and that is becoming the really on the court question mark for this team so far. Can they hit enough threes to open stuff up inside for their talented big men, and can they hit enough threes to hang with other opponents that are hitting threes? So we'll see. There's some interesting tests here in the early season.
I remember when Rashid Suleiman was going to save the Terps too as a transfer. Remember that? Long time ago.
Yeah. There's been a lot of that. Now, the thing about this is so many guys came in this year that are just freshmen, and you just get to see them develop and play. And you can Ayala's already in the starting lineup, and I think that's a great move, because you get Cowan off the ball and see if he can do some other things, and that can change. Cowan can come back on the ball and be as dynamic as we've seen him throughout his career so far. And Sorrell Smith is a guy that's getting a little bit more playing time here of late, and he's a guy that could be that missing shooter. Now, the thing I noticed against A&T was, with them back in a zone, the way Maryland worked the ball, kind of an inside-out thing, a lot of those guys were getting wide-open shots against the zone, which was very encouraging to me. And sooner or later, they're going to drop a whole bunch of them in the basket and make life miserable for their opponents.
Well, it might be a little different when Michigan State or Purdue or Michigan comes rolling through here, but you got 3 months to worry about that. Mike Ashley is out at Terrapin Times as well as at Roth Report Online, where he does his unique brand of comedy. Correct, Mike?
We try. Comedy is so subjective, but yes, I think there's some funny things there if you enjoy that. I'm also on Twitter. It's at LRGSP. TSWRTR. Yeah, I know that's terrible. It's at large sports writer, because I'm a large sports writer at large.
We got to get you a better Twitter handle than that. We're going to work on that. That's my homework. That's going to be my holiday gift for you.
It's the baseball box score abbreviation. It's coded for sports fans.
Oh, boy. Box scores are so 1982. Hey, but speaking of 1982, if I want a night of comedy with you, I think joining you on the 29th of December down at College Park, there may be some it might be fun to just be sitting next to you at a Radford, Maryland basketball game.
I did some of my best work on press row at Radford. Yes, the comedy. I'll tell you stories sometimes.
Well, you had a good run last year, man. I mean, you went dancing last year. It was a lot of fun watching you from afar. Just watching you have fun was fun for me.
It was. It was very gratifying. I would like to point out, though, that Radford's first NCAA men's basketball trip came in 1997, which was the year after I'd left. Radford went Division I in 1984-85, and I had been there all but 2 years through 97, and that was the year that they made it. So apparently I was the problem. I was the one holding the program back all these years.
You weren't the one streaking over the new river at Bissett Park on the Lee Highway, were you?
No, man.
No, that wasn't you.
That. Geography for 100.
You got it, man. Take care, Mike. We'll see you soon.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me on, Nestor.
Mike Ashley from Terrapin Times and, of course, the Roth Report Online. And comedy's just his part-time job. I went kind of nuts in that segment, but I've been holding back on the Terps thing. Wait till I write my Dear Terps letter. They're not going to like me that day. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We're also out in the Buy at Toyota.com Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Download, listen to what you want, where you want, when you want. The kids call it podcasting. We call it the Buy a Toyota.com Audio Vault. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.